And share again. So hopefully I'm showing the right view. Welcome everyone to our listening and sharing session. This is a International Alliance of Academies of Childhood Disability Global Professional Education Committee initiative, which we've run for a few years since 2020. And there's a different theme each year, which is then carried out in sessions across the globe, across the 24-hour period. So this is the Wales UK session. And the theme for this year is around families and who cares for them. You know, we know that families have an important role in supporting members of their family who have childhood onset disabilities. So it's trying to get a bit more insight in what's important to those families and what's important for them as support. So it's an opportunity for us to listen to and share stories from family members from around the world, and in this session in the UK. So that's now just a second slide to just let you know that we're going to record this session, and those recordings will be posted on the IAACD website, so people can't make this session can watch it at a later date. So if you don't want to be recorded, then keep your video off during the session and perhaps rename yourself as a participant. So yes, I'm going to hand you over now to Heather, who's going to chair this session for us, and looking forward to it very much. Over to you, Heather.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm assuming yeah, there we go. Right. So thank you so much for joining us. It's really lovely to see some faces, both, as I said, familiar as well as new faces from different parts of the world. And I hope that this next hour will fly by and that we'll all have a good conversation together. The idea is that we're going to chat about the topic. So we haven't got a formal presentation, but what we bring to it is our lived experience. So the 4 people who are on the channel today, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but they've all been invited to join us because they have some lived experience of having a family member who has cerebral palsy or some other, as Jenny said, childhood onset disability. So although I'm facilitating, I also wear the hat of being a niece to both an aunt and an uncle who had additional needs, a grandfather, and I also have a nephew who has childhood onset disability. So that's my hat, but I'm going to let the others introduce themselves. So I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. So Gopi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Gopi Kitnasamy. I'm parent of very handsome young man who is in his 25 years now, and he has cerebral palsy. And yeah, I wanted to share my experience. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Kirsty.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Taylor. I'm a sibling, so I've got a twin brother called Simon who's got cerebral palsy, got spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy.
And Glenys.
Hi, I'm Glenys Evans. I'm mother to Thomas, who is 41 and has spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy.
Can't believe he's 41, Glenys. That's amazing. Wow. So yeah. Some of you will know that we also happen to work together. So if time allows, we might have some reflection on how our lived experiences also impact on our work or not. So we're talking about today how families or family members need care. But I'm wondering, you know, what does that care look like? What does it feel like for those of us who are family members? And are we even aware of the fact that we need care, or do we need care? So I don't know, Glenys, going the other way around, whether you want to kick us off and say, when did you first become aware of receiving care from others because you had a family member who had cerebral palsy? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I think because our situation was very traumatic and you know, an emergency situation, which ended up with Thomas in intensive care hospital, and overnight things became very difficult and challenging. I would say we sort of felt immediately that we needed support, and our families were immediately there for us. Obviously, we didn't realise at that time what was going to be needed, but I think family members were just as traumatized by everything that was going on as we were, and they instantly sort of reacted and came around us as a family to support Bob, my husband, and I had a 2-year-old daughter at that time. And I have to say, my family have been tremendous support over all the years. That's never stopped and never failed. So instantly, I would say it was our immediate families. I think as things progressed and things became more obvious as to what the problems were that we were going to face with Thomas, in what was a very traumatic first year with him, we were very fortunate to be involved in a very sort of large, busy church environment that had lots of young families with young children and babies. And we very much felt surrounded by a lot of those church members who helped us in ways that perhaps we didn't recognize at the time we needed. But, you know, people cooked meals for us, and people took my daughter to nursery and picked her up and dropped her off and babysat, and visited us in hospitals and sat with us, you know, and just got alongside Bob and myself. So I think, yeah, almost from day one, I would say our immediate family and our church family were very important and played a crucial part in supporting us in ways we did know, but also in ways we didn't know we would need.
Yeah. When we were chatting yesterday, I found it really interesting that the examples you gave were very practical examples, you know, like making a meal or giving a lift or something like that, which is really important and was really interesting to hear. Gopi, do you have examples of maybe where people have supported and given you care and support?
Yeah, definitely. As Glenys mentioned, even though they're like very simple help, but being there for you, someone being there for you, even talking to you at the time, say like even though being a professional in the health professional working in the field, and also say like you can be very strong, but like when you have a like a message or a diagnosis, or when you say when you get that news, it's not very easy when it's personally. So it's but like yeah, but like we had some bad experience as well, because even the close relatives, close family members blaming us like because of the misbeliefs and myths in my country. So thinking that something what we have done had cost it. So but luckily there are like friends and family members who sort of spoke to us, which was a big relief for us, because even to look for some help, it was not easy, because it was very new thing for us, and also definitely a shocking thing. So it was like looking for a string of help when you're in RFC. So it was not an easy to start with, but like
it's interesting, you know, Glenys, you said people gave you help when you didn't even know that you needed that help, and you're saying the same thing, Gopi, that people gave support when you almost didn't know what to ask for, and it's those practical things to start with. Kirsty, I'm guessing your experience is quite different being a sibling, and you know, you would have been being a twin, you would have been born at the same time and won't have much memory of that. What do you think, when do you think you became aware of receiving support or care for yourself as a sibling? Because it wouldn't have been the same as Gopi and Glenys's experiences.
Yeah, you're right. I think having grown up with Simon as my twin, he's Simon, and I played with Simon, and I didn't necessarily notice the kind of differences until maybe I was sort of primary school age, where he might have been, I would have helped to push him around in his trike, and sometimes people would stare at us, and I'd just sometimes give him a little wave. And I guess a lot of my care and support came from my close family and close friends, who I just, particularly in neighbours, where I could just go and knock on the door and say, can I come and play with you? For example, if things were maybe a bit stressful at home, or just, I guess it's the same for most kids to have care from close friends and family. And we also had lots of pets, and I feel like that was nice to just go and stroke the cat for a while. So yeah, definitely, I think different to being a parent. Reflecting back, I think the times where I perhaps would have maybe needed a little bit more care would be if there was more intensity needed for Simon's care. So for example, if he'd been admitted to hospital, or he had epilepsy, so sometimes he'd have some quite big seizures. So my parents had to swoop in and suddenly help with that. So then at that point, I guess I would have felt like, oh, who do I go to now? Because mum and dad are busy. But we had some really close family friends across the road who also happened to be doctors. So that was really useful. We'd pick up the phone, and my parents would, and they would just come over, and they had, there was people that I could play with in that family as well. So we might just pop over theirs for a bit whilst they helped to sort Simon out. So definitely family and friends would be the closest. And we were part of a church network as well. So for my parents, that was really helpful. And I had some friends from church too.
And I guess care for you of a practical nature was also caring for your parents, wasn't it? Because it gave them time and space to help Simon with what he needed help with.
I tried not to make too much of a fuss myself. I was the one who smiled at them often and tried to just be super helpful. You think it's the same probably now. In adulthood, I try and just be the one who helps out and things like that. So it's given me a lot of resilience, I think, and positive traits.
That's interesting. I'm also interested in this idea that maybe we don't need the same level of care and support all the time, that there's a variety in when we need support and stuff. Do you ever feel that yourself, Glenys, that there are times when you want more support or less support, and how do you actively seek that? Is that something that's easy to do or not, the sort of seeking, and who do you go to for help? Is that easy to do?
I think it varies and it changes over the years. I think in the early days, having a toddler and a baby and a sick and well baby, a lot of it was, as Kirsty said, Thomas had seizures, so you wouldn't know from one day to the next whether there was going to be a seizure there, whether you were going into hospital, and then it's managing Vicky, what happened to her while we were in and out of hospital and all the appointments. So it was definitely a huge help having friends that you knew were at the end of the phone, that you could say, could you take Vicky, like Kirsty was saying, take her to play with her friends, maybe sleep overnight or things like that. But also just, I think, building a strong network of friends around you, the ones that you knew you could just pick up the phone and you could go for a coffee, or they'd come for a coffee, or the ones, we just didn't know what was ahead of us at that point either. We didn't know what the diagnosis was going to be. We just knew we had a very sick baby. So the unknown was huge. And I think people genuinely wanted to support us and help us, thinking this could have been them with a sick baby. And I think it was, in the reverse, I think the fact that they were able to do practical things to help us, help them, it made them feel useful and that they had a purpose in doing something. So I think it worked both ways. And I think, that changed over the years, because as the child gets older, you have different needs. So I think you definitely have I don't know whether different levels of friendship or
Yeah.
people around you. You know, my mum was always the one that I would go to, you know, in the first instance, but initially she didn't live close to me, so that was difficult geographically. But in later years, when we moved back closer to my own family, you know, she played a huge role in babysitting for us, and even having the children maybe over a weekend to give us a breakaway or a night out. And I think as the years go on, I've always said this, you need to recognize that you have needs as a couple, you have needs, and you need to stay strong and keep going, you know. And I also very strongly felt that we still needed to continue to work on our marital relationship. You know, we did need a night out or at a time together that just it wasn't always the children there. So people giving us a night out or babysitting to have some time together was as important. You may not see that in the early days, but looking back, then you can recognize those things are important.
Yeah. And as you say, it's not just caring for Thomas and the situation with Thomas, but it's caring for you as a person and you as a family to help you develop and thrive, even though there's this added demand on your resources. Yeah, that's really important. I know, Kirsty, we talked a little bit about siblings and sibling activities, because that's something that might be viewed by others as, well, we're looking after the sibling, we're looking after the other person. What's been your experience of a sibling sort of activities of a formal nature? Because you've talked about the informal support from neighbors and being able to go knock on the door and say, can I come and play? What about the sort of the more formal sibling? What's been your experience there?
So I think it was Bernardo's charity set up a sibling group that I went along to. I think I was primary school age and my sister was in secondary school, so we both went, but we were in two separate groups. At the time, I don't think I fully understood the purpose of it, and I think it was to provide some support, a little bit of a chance to talk, but also just to come together with a group of other children who were siblings of a child with a disability, and to spend some time just doing like craft activities or puppet show. So for me at the time, I was a bit like, oh, I'd quite like to stay at home actually, but I will go along to this and make my little posters and things. So I'd say I didn't absolutely love it, but it was an opportunity, I think, more so for probably my parents to have a little of a bit of a breather, less, because I had a younger brother and an older sister as well. So there's quite a few of us, which in some ways was really good because we could keep each other entertained. But in other ways, there was
Did you all go to the sibling activities, or is it just you?
My sister did. My brother was too young, I think, at the time to be able to go. So I'm not sure he did any actually. But that was the only thing I remember, and in terms of actual formal sort of sibling support that I ever did. And then otherwise it was kind of Simon went on respite occasionally, and if that was for a longer period, we'd tend to do like more active holiday as a family, because we're all quite sort of outdoorsy and we enjoy walks and active lifestyle. So we just kind of take that opportunity.
That's an interesting concept of respite, being not just for the carers, but for the whole family, and what it enabled you to do. I see, Gopi, you're nodding to that. Is that something that you've experienced, or something you just think is a good idea?
No, the sibling, like the experience shared by Kirsty, like I would say the siblings are angels. Like they not only support the whole family, but like the bond they have shared between them. It's I think it's a blessing, because otherwise it'll that moral support, the understanding they have between each other, that definitely helps parents a lot, because otherwise it's in this journey they actually do a lot of support the family to take it forward. And as definitely the respite will be another thing, not only for the the person himself, but like for the whole family itself, yeah, definitely it will be very useful. And also that's that gives you some sort of time off, like yeah, for yourself and yeah, for the other family members.
Dennis, you were nodding when the topic of respite came up. What are your experiences or thoughts about that? Because I'm sure there are positives and negatives to it, but what are your
Yeah, and I think over the years we've probably accessed a number of different things. When Thomas was older, he used to access some respite care through his school, and they would sort of take him away for a week's holiday. So whenever he was offered that, sorry about my dog barking, whenever he was offered that, we would deliberately make a huge effort to take our, because I had another child by then as well, a younger child, but we would definitely take a holiday break and go away with the other two children and do some of the more active things that possibly were difficult when you with a child that you've got in a wheelchair, or those sort of things. But we also had some respite care provided to us in the format of babysitting at home, and I had somebody from an agency that would come in once a week and babysit for an evening for us, and would babysit 3 children, and again allow Bob and myself to go out. So I think different things at different times have helped us, and all very good.
Dennis, you mentioned earlier the concept of, going to have a coffee with someone and them coming to you. And to me as a woman, coffee always comes with conversation. And we've talked a lot about the practical things and creating time and space and doing things. Do you think what's been your experience of wanting to sort of talk about things, getting care for yourself through talking? Has that been a big feature? Or I guess it varies from person to person, won't it? But I don't know.
I think it does vary. Some people want to talk and find it easy to talk, and other people don't. And I think there are different times and situations when that can be easier or more difficult. I think, if you've gone through quite a traumatic time and everything's very emotional, heightened emotions, sometimes just stuff just comes out. So you just, may talk easier to some people. Sometimes you bottle things up and then it stays there for a while, and it might burst out at different times. Again, I think it goes back. I think at times I have found it easier to talk to close friends than family, because I haven't always wanted to burden my family in a way that I think it's different how they deal with it. But then other times it's been the opposite. It's been family rather than friends. So it depends what it is. But I do think probably in our society, I think it is, and it has been, maybe it's changing, or hopefully it's changing now a bit, but I think it's traditionally been easier for women and mums to talk than for dads and men. I think as a society, we've not always made it easy for dads and men to talk. And I think that's been quite lacking. And they, they need it just as much as the mums and the women. It's their baby, their child, as much. So I would like to think that has changed and is changing.
Yeah. Kirsty, what's your experience? Because that must be different as a sibling. You have come at a whole different way of things. And where do you think your support has come from mainly?
I'd say mainly my mum, but when Glenna said about bottling things up, I was quite good at that. So I wouldn't always ask many questions, I guess, but I'm sure discussions came up at various points and she would help explain things to me, but she was definitely, I think, who I'd go to. And then in secondary school, I tended to only invite really close friends around to my house. There was lots of equipment there, and I think those particular close friends would be the ones that I would perhaps talk to if I had anything that I wanted to voice. But yeah, often I wouldn't really my husband now would be
Yeah, yeah,
probably the one
yeah.
who I'd chat to. So yeah, through the life kind of span, it
Mhm.
varies depending on
Yeah,
age and
yeah,
stage,
yeah.
I'd say. But
I know when we were chatting earlier, it's a really personal thing to talk like this. So thank you so much for talking. But I think there's a huge amount of trust that you have to have with somebody, don't you, to be able to have any sort of conversation. And for those who aren't that close, I guess it's the practical things that are really helpful. And as you said, Glenys, it allows people to do something that is meaningful and gives them something to do as well. Yeah. Mm. Do you think that there's anything that I haven't asked you this question before, so I'll give you time to think, but is there anything that you feel you wish people had known that they would have done differently? Gopi, you mentioned family members having misunderstanding about disability and stuff, but that might be something. But is there anything that you wish people had known or could have done differently? I don't know, any of you want to answer that?
Understanding the family and their needs, that's another important thing, because so that they can then they can sort of like come up with like talk to them, and also ask them what the support they need, but like understanding them and their needs will be an important thing. And also like say from our experience, like talking to their own children about, like, because to see them in the same way they see their friends and other children, because that sometimes it will be a bit difficult, because when they don't understand and when they don't talk to their children about the difference and like what the condition, and like explain them and to be treat them as equal. Yeah, those are simple things, but like that goes a long way when you sort of be with them when you go for a sort of a family event or somewhere. And then if they don't include yeah, include your child with among
Yeah.
them. So those, yeah, I think those are the simple things they can talk to them, or like understand the families. Yeah, that will
Yeah.
be very important.
Kirsty, I think you had a wonderful way of just dealing with people who were maybe staring or something at Simon. Do you want to share that with you? Just
yeah, I guess for me, sometimes people be like, oh, like, or his sister, and it's just like, I'm his sister, but actually he brings me a lot of joy. We have a lovely time together. He is part of our close family unit. I don't necessarily need the awe, because we're really, although there are challenges, we're really like happy, and we make the best of what we've been given, and we just throw ourselves out there. And we were taking Simon over Stiles on his trike to make sure we could go for country walks as a family.
You might need to explain what a stile is in case
or a gate out on a country walk on a nice muddy field. We'd still be bringing Simon through that. And my mum used to call it chitty chitty bang bang. We'd be helping to lift the bike over a stile if there wasn't a gate, basically. And so we tried not to let that kind of hold us back from what we all wanted to do as much as possible. Obviously, there were times where it did, and that's when the respite was super helpful. But it was like we could still have lots of fun together, and I think every family situation is different. So it's definitely, as Gopi said, really important to get to know like each individual in that family and how that family dynamic is, how it works. And obviously that changes through kind of different times. Some weeks can be more stressful than others. But yeah, just meeting that family where they're at, trying to really understand them.
Yeah, I was interested, Gopi, you said to ask people what support they need. And I wonder how many of us have been asked, what do you need, or what can I do for you? I don't think I've ever been asked that as a family member, which is really interesting. I don't know what your experiences are, the three of you.
Yeah, I had a very very positive and a nice experience when one of my close friend invited us to his for a dinner, and he know that like I have a son who uses wheelchair. And then we went there. He actually made a sort of a ramp with wooden to make it more easy for us to, because otherwise we used to lift and we used to have difficulty. But like he made a ramp with sort of the wooden plugs, and then here that I was almost in tears, because those are simple things, but like it makes a big sort of a positive sort of feel when you go in, and then that was a good one.
Yeah. In a minute or two, I'm going to invite people who have joined us, whether there are any particular questions that you want to ask. We don't promise to answer them, but we're willing to engage in that way. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes that if there's something you want to think about, you can. Ganesh, I was going to ask you something and it's totally flown out of my head. What was it? Oh, has anybody sort of ever asked you what you...
I can't straight away think of being asked. But going back to what you said at the beginning of the last question about the need, I think one of the difficulties and challenges for us as a family, initially when Thomas was taken ill, was that, cerebral palsy was not mentioned at all. And we certainly didn't know and understand what that was all about. So as time went on, until we did get more of a diagnosis, it was trying to drag things out of doctors and professionals as to what was the matter, what was going to happen, how was he going to be, and then trying to explain all of that to your wider family and friends. And suddenly you're thinking, and I have to be the professional here. I'm the one that's supposed to know all the answers, and you're floundering, and you're trying to pass all of that onto your family and people. So, that's quite stressful in itself. And then a bit like Gopi said as well, there are elements that some family members just shut down and they do not want to hear it, and they do not hear what you're trying to say. And it's, if I close my ears to this, I can just ignore it and it might all go away. So some family members can give you that side as well as the supportive side. But I know I'm going back quite a few years, but I do think this is really important for anybody really. But it's the language that is used, and certainly that has improved over the years. But I think the language that professionals use to parents and wider family is really important, and it isn't always good and great. And actually, I have said this many, many times over the years, that at crucial times in your child's life, when you go in to hospital appointments for consultations and when things need to be said, and sometimes you're prepared thinking something might be coming, but other times you're not prepared. And whatever is said, as a parent, you don't forget those important appointments and those times. So the language that is used becomes really, really crucial. And I have shared that with professionals over the years, and sometimes they are a bit shocked and dumbfounded, as if to say, oh, a parent might remember that. Or actually those words were used and I'm surprised, but I honestly can say I haven't forgotten those things from the week that Thomas was taken ill. And some of that language I would never want other families to face. So I think for us, trying to explain things and grow with your child's disability and share that is important, but also that journey with whichever healthcare professionals are involved with you and your family. Typically those people are going to be involved with you for long periods, long years, long times involved with you. So you need to build up a trusting relationship to have a very productive and positive relationship. And sadly, we know that doesn't happen for everybody. But I just think that's important to say, because it can also impact on how you cope with things.
Yeah.
You know, it can as a parent, it could make you shut down and you know, get very depressed and not cope. Or this, you could, you know, it can be, this is a difficult situation, but if we work together on this and be positive about it, we can have a much better outcome and outlook.
Yeah. I think just one thing that's going around in my head in response to Gopi's answer about asking for help is I can think within my own family, I might have asked people what I could do to help and maybe had a rebuff. You know, we don't want your help. And I guess that's made me hold back. But actually, one needs to ask over and over and over again, what can I do to help you at this time, in this stage of life, in this context, and that. And I think that's just made me think about that. So thank you for that reminder. So yeah. I'm going to throw the floor open for a few minutes to questions. So if anybody's got a question that you want to ask, perhaps you could just unmute yourself. If you want to raise a hand, I think we've got enough that Jenny and I can spot people between us. Put your video on so we can see you, would be really helpful. And if you want to ask a question, and then after about 5 minutes or so, I'm going to take a slightly different tack with our discussion. So is there any question that anybody wanted to ask of the four of us? Gosha, and then Angela.
Hello, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the automatic hand in my settings, so thank you for spotting my hand. Thank you very much, all. I really enjoy listening to your stories. I know that over the years we're so much better now at listening to the families and recognizing the family needs. So do you feel we were talking about looking back, but now, right now, do you find that you know where to go for help if you wanted or needed help? Do you find that there's more support than perhaps you know, you used to have? Or do you feel well informed about where to find that support? Or maybe it's not enough and you feel we should do more for our families? What's your views?
Thanks, Gosha. I'm looking at Glenys because you've got I'm not sure if it's a smile coming over your face, but yeah, do you as a mother now feel that you would know where to go for help? Do you think services have improved, which I think is part of Gosha's question? And the other part is going to be the tack I'm going to take later. So I don't know, have things improved enough?
I think I'm probably going to say no to that, not enough.
Yeah.
I think they have improved in some ways, some considerable ways, but probably not enough. I would like to think that they have improved for our younger families, you know, babies and younger children, that they're getting better support at that stage of their life. This is very personal to me now, but at the stage that I'm at in life, you know, as I said, Thomas is 41, you know, I'm mid-60s, and things are can still be stressful in having, you know, full responsibility for Tom now at his age and his stage in life. Things can still be very challenging. I've said about the support from my wider family, and that is still there in lots of ways, but probably I turn more now to my other two children, who are amazing young adults, and both support me hugely with Tom as and when needed. But it does concern me going forward as to where we will be heading as I get older and Tom gets older, because there doesn't seem to be much, well, any support for me and him in lots of ways. I think, again, we've hit a really difficult time since COVID. A lot of services have been cut back. A lot of our children, Thomas included, we're looking at service cutbacks, support cutbacks. So I think more and more it is coming to the family. but I have to recognize I'm not going to be here forever. So it is a lifespan challenge. And I'm in a very different place from, where sort of Kirsty and Gopi are, but that's part of my thought.
Yeah. Really challenging, and different people have different levels of need, different individuals, and those needs can be met in different ways, and that will be unique and different from all. I mean, I think of myself, and I had an aunt who was dependent on my father for her support and care, but in a totally different country and context, and it just looked very different, and her needs were very different from Thomas's. So it's different, and will affect families in different ways. Angela, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, everybody. It was really nice to hear, in a very relaxing kind of time at the end of the day on a Friday. I'm sorry not more of my team joined. I wish they could. It's just a difficult time. My thought is kind of, what are your opinions on lots of our families of the babies will join kind of neonates groups, so kind of, where the parents get together with other families that have gone through similar circumstances, but others will choose kind of more mainstream groups, and the kind of pros and cons to both, because we really want our families not to be isolating themselves at home, because we certainly get that as well, and it's hard to know where do you direct them to is what's right for them. And I just wondered what your thoughts were, because some of our families will say they find the mainstream ones quite challenging, especially when the babies are starting to move. And even, our little ones, even the ones that don't end up with a diagnosis of CP, the extreme prems, the families find it hard to have to go through their story every time with somebody new, somebody that may not have the social graces not to ask. Just your thoughts really, whether kind of that good or bad, to be around people that understand your story, your journey, or and how to share your journey with people in random groups, rhyme time and stuff like that.
Who wants to answer that one?
I'm happy to, but I don't want to hold time.
Go for it, Glenys.
Well, my experience is, and spending a lot of time with some of the young babies and the new, we understand that is a really stressful time when you've had a long time on neonatal care. And we certainly hear a lot that people, if you go to mainstream groups, there's lots of questions. Oh, why isn't your baby doing this? Why, are they not doing that? And they're already this age, and not understanding the pressures that if you've been 3-4 months in hospital, all those sort of things. So, I always sort of say that you shouldn't, as hard as it is, try not to feel pressured into having to tell your story. That is private to you, and you must do that as and when you feel you want to share. And perhaps you need to build up a relationship with people before you share that. But it can be difficult and challenging in mainstream groups because people are just not geared up for that sort of thing. I've also known people, that have been in neonatal care with other parents, and they've made friendships, and that's become a new group to them. Because I think what often happens for a lot of us as parents is you might have a friendship group around you, but when your child is the only one with an additional need or special need, and perhaps a long hospital stay, it may not be intentional, but sometimes some of those friends drift away and there becomes a wider and wider gap between what your child is doing to what the rest of your previous group's children are doing. So it's almost like they start new friendships with people they've met in a hospital group or a different play group. I don't think there's any particular right or wrong way for any individual. I think they have to find their own way, which is challenging. And I think that's where professionals perhaps can help direct people if there are places. But just even that, just making friends and acquaintances after you've had a baby, what should be a natural time of meeting people in a happy situation isn't always as straightforward as that for a lot of parents.
Yeah, and it is very difficult, you know. So I've worked with peds forever, as lots of you know, and I think, you know, these babies end up, and these children with cerebral palsy, they can quite often end up with a physio as pretty much their key worker, that kind of, you know, they just stay involved, seem like forever, and lots of other services will dip in and out, and you end up having to be the kind of the font of all knowledge, and being able to share kind of what might be the right thing to look at, and supporting those families. And it's a lot of pressure, and I do feel like, you know, services nowadays, it's very much about tick the box and then move to the next patient, and it's a lot of the time it's us oldies that are like, no, it's this holistic approach, and it is quite challenging to teach that to a new physio, that actually, no, you're not just going to have a look at baby's movements, you're going to support mum, you might talk about what's available locally, or did they go to neonates this week, and you know, that sort of thing. And sometimes our therapists, our newer ones, are quite blinkered to, no, they've just come for this, I haven't got time for that. I say that after an hour and a half appointment with a 2-month-old today.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch it a little bit, if that's okay. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to switch it a bit. We all happen to be working together, and we work professionally with parents who have their own stories. Just as a way of finishing, I wonder whether there's something positive that you can reflect on, that your experience has changed, and this links to Gosha's question, has changed the way maybe you as a professional now interact. Because, I mean, I don't know, Angela, but, you know, you come as an experienced therapist, but maybe you haven't got lived experience of a disability in your family. I don't know. But how has
we do. That's why I'm in this job.
Sorry. Yeah. But how has your lived experience changed and shaped what you offer currently to families as a professional? So taking off your personal hat and putting your professional hat on. Kirsty, do you think there's anything that you have learnt and taken that influences the way you work now?
Yeah, I think there's lots and lots of things. I was quite an observer as a sibling, so I attended quite a few physio sessions, MDT meetings with my brother, and it's the ones where they kind of meet you as you come in. How are you? Do we need to pick you off the ceiling today, or are you actually having quite a good day? Kind of sit you down, have a chat, check in, not just with the child, but also parents, maybe even the sibling. The language, as Glenys mentioned, trying to be positive, talking about what their child can do initially, rather than what are the problems you're facing, kind of, and just going straight down that path. And just having the time to talk, rather than just straight in and do, right, we're going to work on this one thing today and then you're gone. It's kind of, it's a journey and a process almost every single time you see the family, I think.
And I know from working with you that that's very true of you, that you are very holistic in looking at the whole family who've entered the room and giving people time and stuff. So I can see that that's impacted on your ability to interact with people. Gopi, is there anything that you would say has shaped the way you do things as a professional?
Definitely listening to the families, because that's another important thing, because sometimes we sort of professionals, they just talk to the family, but like they don't sort of listen to them and understand what they want and what they need, and also to make them part of their the giving them the sort of change making sort of authority, or like the for their own for their own child. It's an important thing, make sort of giving them the importance. I think that's another thing which is, I think, important, and that's what I have learned.
Thank you. Glenys, is there anything? I'm sure there's
so many.
shaped service. So
Sorry.
you've shaped a service.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, you know, for me, it's obviously been a longer journey, but I think, you know, having been involved in setting Cerebral Palsy Cymru up, which definitely started from a very personal need and wanting better and more therapy for Thomas. But that changed very quickly into being available to all of the children that need us. So I think that has been a massive part of, you know, my life's journey with Tom. But I'd like to think, you know, that over the years we've made huge inroads in how we deal with parents, how we speak to parents, how we interact with parents, how we listen to parents. And I do think now that certainly as our service, you know, we put the parents at the top of that priority list, and how we work with them and what we do with the parents, and try to be very inclusive. And I always like, you know, the analogy of the weighing scales, that, you know, at our centre, we might be the professionals in cerebral palsy, but the parents are the experts in their baby. And the sort of scales might be up and down, but in time, as we work together, you know, those scales even out, and we want to, you know, teach and enable the parents to become just as involved and actively know what they're doing with their child, and understand their child, and understand the child with cerebral palsy's needs and what that is. So I think, yeah, I think things have changed considerably, but I also think there's a long way to go to get things as good as we would all like them to be, and as I would like it to be for the babies being born today and tomorrow.
Yeah, brilliant. And thank you for your comment, Yasmin. That's really lovely to hear about your experience as well. So thank you for that in the chat. Appreciate that. I'm aware of time, and I want to try and wrap things up. And I think what struck me as a professional person, as well as a family member, is we started this conversation talking about the fact that our support had come from family and friends, whether that was in a church network, a social network, or wider family, immediate family. And maybe that's where I'd like to finish, that actually as professionals, we've got a lot to learn. We have learned, we have shaped our own practice because of our experience. But as Angela was saying earlier, the importance of encouraging and developing those other networks and friendships, because those seem to be the ones that have been the most significant in many ways. And sometimes that takes the pressure off me as a professional, but actually to recognize that I, as a professional, don't always meet the needs. I don't, by setting up a sibling group that Kirsty goes to but doesn't understand why, or creating appointments and using wrong language and stuff isn't always the helpful thing. But signposting and making sure people have time and space to develop and thrive as a whole family and not just focused on the child is really important. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I really appreciate it, the three of you. And those of you who've joined us, thank you for your contributions and for listening. And I hope you'll be able to join some of the other sessions left in the day if you haven't already. And there will always be recordings, I know. So do come back and listen to other countries and learn from their experiences. But thank you, everybody.